Vision Zero program, in relative priorities, this is a really important one, and I'll try to put this in a very digestible format because I know we're very limited on time. But what I did want to do is just out of curiosity see if anybody knew these numbers. So when we think about transportation throughout the country, the number of rail-related deaths, so railroad-related deaths, in 2017, does anyone want to take just a wild guess? How many? 823. Yeah, it's surprising. In United States, all throughout. So air travel throughout the world, all of the world, air travel, how many fatalities, 2017?
200.
13. Great kid. I had absolutely no idea, so I wanted to look those up. Fatalities on roadways in same year, 2017. Do you want to take just a wild guess?
56,000.
It's a good guess. 40,000. 40,100.
Nationwide? Worldwide?
Nationwide, 2017. So you see that the numbers there on our roadway far well and beyond those that happen in other transportation modes. And it's become something that we've just simply accepted. And I say we and need to point most of the fingers back at traffic engineers like me. We just say fatality is just part of the way the world works. Cars are driven by people. They're not driven by former Air Force pilots or people in the railroad industry that have years and years of training and requirements to go through. And so the mistakes that humans make, it's terrible. We hate it, but they're inevitable. Vision Zero, it's a safety program. At the end of the day, what we're talking about to you and presenting to you is a data-driven safety program that identifies where there are safety problems, both proactively and reactively, in order to fix those problems towards zero deaths is what it's about. But and this will talk about some of the data here locally within Athens-Clarke County. But the reason Vision Zero portion of it I think is so important, it's something that started in Sweden. It's starting to take hold in the United States, where there's not an acceptable number of traffic deaths in my view, and the foundation of the movement as well. So this was implemented probably the longest running program is in New York City, and they've experienced a 28% drop in fatalities, 45% drop in pedestrian fatalities. In 2014, and I thought this one was the most interesting of all of them. So between 2014 and 2017, the years that New York City has had that policy and available data, those are the lowest fatality rates since 1910, when they started collecting data for roadway fatalities. And of course, if you think back to 1910, the automobile was starting to come around and starting to become something that's part of the fabric of our lives. So there's been some very great success stories. Sweden has seen, where Vision Zero started, has seen increase in the number of roadway miles traveled and a decrease in the number of fatalities. And that's completely, at least the decrease in fatalities, completely opposite of what we've seen in the United States. So you see here, we again, fingers pointed this way, aren't doing so well in Athens-Clarke County. This is a graph that I showed you with intersection improvements. Depending on which item we look at, and I tend to look at the injury and fatality crashes just because of the severity and the meanings there. Number 4 for injury. Now, 101 for fatality. That fluctuates wildly based on 1 or 2 fatalities. So, out of 159 counties, sure that number is maybe a little bit more acceptable. But what we've seen, so FY 16, 17, 18. So we look at traffic fatalities on fiscal years just for to get into the budget report. We've had an average of 12 fatalities a year. So if you remember back to the beginning where we talked about worldwide air deaths, and everyone knows someone or is someone that's scared of flying on a plane, Little Athens-Clarke County has had about as many fatalities in a year as worldwide airline deaths, and that's commercial and private airlines. So it's something that it's not an Athens-Clarke County problem alone. It's really a problem throughout the country and the world. So the traditional approach, so what is Vision Zero? What's the difference between Vision Zero and the way things were done before? So, and again, I'm not, the traffic engineering industry is changing to what you see here. For years, I would get fatality reports, and I confess that when you look at those fatality reports from a traffic accident, you read it almost looking for the we didn't do anything, right? Like there's something else going on here, and ultimately you get to the line about and they were intoxicated far above the legal limit, and okay, well, that's tragic, that's terrible, but that's the cause, and that there's nothing we can do about that. We can't drive the car for them. So those traffic deaths, then just the thinking traditionally was those are just inevitable. When we look at those other modes of transportation, traffic deaths are preventable. And so it's really a paradigm shift there. Traditional approach, we expect people to be perfect drivers, and that's just not realistic. The Vision Zero approach understands that people will make mistakes and that the transportation network should be fault tolerant there. Traditional prevent collisions, and Vision Zero. This is an important shift for the traffic engineers. Rather than just looking at that number of collisions, this program really focuses in on those severe collisions, and not so property damage. Those rear ends, those are annoying, but those aren't life changing. And so really prioritizing those injury crashes, those fatality crashes. That's really where this comes in. And rather than looking at just individual responsibility, there's a responsibility by those operating roadway systems to operate, and it's really something that's important, and really from an economic standpoint, saving lives is expensive. That's oftentimes something that's put out there, and really when we think of the practical impacts, and even if we were to try to monetize the impacts of improving safety, it's something that makes sense every day of the week in any way that you look at it. So elements of the plan: multidisciplinary disciplinary leadership. So partnering with other departments, this is something that we've started where we've talked to these other departments. There's a desire to be coordinated. What we lack is an action plan, and on down you'll see data driven. That's something that we're working on operationally now. If you were to ask me how many crashes were on Lexington Road in 2018, our traffic engineering technician would have to search the GEARS database, which is the state database for all crashes. That's the final repository for those crash reports. They'd have to search US 78, State Route 10, Lexington Road, Lexington Highway. There might even be a Lexington Avenue for some reason in there, and look at all those different, and then look at the crash reports and say, well, this one says Lexington Road, but really it happened down Gaines School. And so there's a level of cleaning that data that is just, we don't have the capability of doing right now. We're looking at ways to fix that. That's not part of this project, but it's important so that we can position ourselves to be very data driven, to go after those safety issues as they arise. Equity, looking at all users, not looking just at roadway users, but looking at those vulnerable users and understanding that they're an important piece of this, and that we have a responsibility to protect really all users of the system. Cooperation, collaboration, really a thread through the full plan, and then being very transparent and saying, here's what the data is showing us, here's what we've done, and here's how we're doing, is a very important part of that. So many of these are traditional responses, but they're heightened, and with the awareness, both that really no amount of fatalities is acceptable, and two, that really driven at solving those severe injury and fatality crashes. So what this would specifically fund, so trying to bring it back down into the practical for SPLOST 2020, are these initiatives here. So rapid response, safety improvements, based on crash trends or even severe crash incidents. High injury corridor remediation. So these would be corridor safety specific plans for those corridors that are seeing problems on the corridor, but there's not one specific location that we can point to. It would prioritize that corridor as a whole. Roadway safety audit team. This is something great that we've got a lot of great partners in other departments where we pull in, the Transportation Public Works, in partnership with the police department, with transit. We get, part of this team includes the actual bus drivers that are on the routes and the areas that we're looking at. We pull in landscape management. We pull in a lot of partners throughout the government to walk these areas and drive these areas and really try to see it from as many perspectives to see when we hear about an issue, we go out there, we examine it, and we come up with recommendations based on what, from multiple perspectives, might get at solving those problems, improving sight distance, traffic control, and improved crosswalks. It's really a wide gamut. And even within these high injury corridor remediation, there would be a number of different initiatives through there. It may be guardrail, it may be signage, it may be a number of different things based on the actual experience and the actual history of crashes within that. So with that, questions? Yes, ma'am.
Am I correct? It seems as though the Vision Zero program is a broader program for safety than 26, than traffic calming. It reaches more areas.
And thank you for that question, because that's a distinction that I should have made in the presentation. So a big piece of Vision Zero is safety, and a big piece of safety, as we talked about at the beginning of traffic calming, is speeds of traffic, just that kinetic energy of the vehicles. So these, and really all projects would need to work in tandem with Vision Zero and identifying, should we have an intersection improvement? Let's look and see what's going on and be very deliberate about what improvements we're going to do. But the way that those two projects would work hand in hand would be, in my anticipation and working through the various committees and mayor and commission, the traffic calming program, management program would be more request-based from a neighborhood perspective and very focused on traffic calming. And very focused on what are the speeds currently and where can we take the speeds, irrespective of crash information, though that oftentimes overlaps. And whereas the Vision Zero would be very focused in on severe injury and fatality crashes. So they would work absolutely in tandem, but really where Vision Zero would be more of an umbrella for all things safety, and the traffic management would provide dedicated funding for traffic calming alone. Yes.
How is this Vision Zero different from what we might reasonably expect to be good management that you conduct in the organization anyhow?
So they go hand in hand. What relative to the actual project requests would be funding. So we have these initiatives. The road safety audit team is a part of many Vision Zero programs, something that we do currently. And we come up with a list of recommendations, and there's some of those that we can do through our operating funds, but there's some that just exceed what we have. We don't have a dedicated safety improvement project in any of our programs across general fund, SPLOST, or T-SPLOST. So this would provide that dedicated safety, kind of broad umbrella safety.
Yeah, I'm getting at something that's even a little bit different from that.
Okay.
I mean, this is data driven, and I think that makes a whole lot of sense. But it seems to me one would have the reasonable expectation that we would be doing this anyhow, and putting the label of Vision Zero on it doesn't seem to me to be very much value added.
I see where you're going. The difference is we don't throw out crashes because they're just kind of in philosophical approaches. So set aside the capital funding portion of it, because whether it's the traditional, you're right, the traditional or the Vision Zero, there would be a request for safety funding. The difference here, or with Vision Zero as a program, is those user error fatalities aren't just simply set aside and we go, well, yeah, those happened, but we're not ever going to do anything to fix those. The goal then becomes, okay, those, rather than those happened, and I'm sorry that they happened, but we're going to kind of set those over here and we're going to look at the road. We really, as traffic engineers, and really as a coordinated effort between our various partners in police and fire and planning and health department, pull those in and say, okay, this is a piece of the puzzle. This is a piece of the fatalities that are happening. How can we make our system more fault tolerant? Maybe there's an initiative that can be funded through capital. Maybe we can create a more forgiving shoulder that when there is a run off the road based on someone not paying attention, that then it doesn't it causes a crash, sure, but it doesn't cause a fatality. And so that's a little bit of it's that getting at the.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but it just seems to me that sort of constantly revising and improving ongoing management might accommodate a lot of what you're talking about here. That's the point. Yeah.
Sure, there's absolutely, and there's nothing. I'm not just fully disparaging traffic safety, traditional traffic safety improvements. It's just we as an industry have come to accept a certain level of it. And I just.
Well, yeah, I mean, I get that point, the distinction between traditional approaches and vision.
Sure.
That makes a lot of sense.
But I hear what you're saying about management. Yes, sir.
Are you planning to stay for the discussion tonight at the end?
I wasn't.
Okay, then I want to ask a question, but I was going to save it for the end. To circle back to what Carl said, I love all these presentations. I'm still thinking about the Barnett, the bicycle improvements from earlier.
Uh-huh.
I don't cycle, and I live on the west side, so I'm not sure how much of a tempest in a teapot this was, or how much of a big fiasco the Barnett Shoals thing was. Thinking of how we might address this with the voters, what can you give us as far as assurances that the mistakes that were made, the short-sightedness in that repaving, the resurfacing project, will be addressed and not happen again?
Sure.
Because I can see how the appearance could be cast as, well, it's just going to be more money for the same kind of thing that we're all going to be confused about.
First, that project was entirely a resurfacing project that had a bike element added to it. So it was not one of these kind of identified Athens in Motion projects that, hey, here's a project, let's figure out how we can fund it. So that's part one. Part two, I think what's important to point out is we did nothing in a vacuum and would plan on doing nothing in a vacuum. And so robust outreach, particularly on bicycle improvements as they affect traffic, either through construction, which is more likely here, or should there be a permanent effect on traffic, engaging the community is absolutely critical and an important piece of this. And then finally, we got a position that's been reallocated to a bicycle and pedestrian coordinator that's going to be entirely focused on pedestrian, bicycle and safety coordinator, entirely focused on issues of both active transportation and safety broadly, that will give some dedicated staff to implementing these projects in a very deliberate, community-involved way. Yes?
My question is related just to Vision Zero, but I have something else I want to comment on before we force through projects. But regarding Vision Zero, this to me seems like another example of the need to work regionally. Like, so this, one of the drawbacks of being small Clarke County is that we are contending with the traffic of not just people who live in Clarke County, but people who live in outlying counties. So does Vision Zero include any sort of, would it work through something like Bayports, or is there some way that it could work with the surrounding counties? Because it seems like to do it just with Clarke, I realize
Sure.
that there's value at both levels, but it seems like it has to happen at a regional level.
Absolutely. This project would not be at the detriment of those other sources of improvements that we have. So Just to mention a few, GDOT is a partner that we actively engage with in identifying issues on system, what we call state routes, and partnering with them to improve those. So that coordination, we have a very good relationship with the district traffic ops. So that would continue. The May courts is something that has been evolving as of late on a national level, because there's some national federal compliance with that planning organization where there are specific safety targets. Safety is becoming more and more and more a piece of those regional planning efforts. So yes, partnership internally and externally, and those are critical partnerships that, while maybe not mentioned in this presentation, would be a part of safety in general.
I was just like, well, so when I think vision or visionary, I think the project you mentioned earlier about connected signs and cars is probably more so the way you could go to reasonably decrease the number of traffic casualties. Because I mean, I think when you look at it, autonomous cars, I mean, right now they're working on autonomous level 5 cars or something, trucks too. You think about, you have machine-to-machine communications already in the pipeline, already happening. I feel like working to be a more connected smart city would probably be the approach. And the shift of the frame of mind was us as traffic engineers and people working in local government should kind of be thinking along the lines of that.
Absolutely. There's kind of this dual challenge of looking at the issues of today while not precluding ourselves and boxing ourselves into a corner that the way it is today is the way it will always be. And so being able to address kind of the safety issues that we have now and look towards the future of where we're going. I won't, I know I'm over time, so I won't get on too long of a tangent, but looking at the future, and that is absolutely where the technology is going. I think most likely, at least for a time period, there will be a mixed fleet of those connected vehicles and those drivered vehicles as it cycles through. So there's going to be some unique challenges from that.